On matters that cannot be compromised, there will be no compromise, and Japan's interests will never be sacrificed. In the face of the letter from Trump proposing to raise tariffs on Japan to 25%, the attitude of the Japanese Prime Minister was unexpectedly tough. As Asia's most loyal ally fostered by U.S. hegemony, Japan's remarks this time are somewhat outrageous, which explains why Trump said Japan has been spoiled. In the 1980s, in order to help the United States reduce its trade deficit, Japan yielded to the hegemonic intimidation of the United States and cooperated in signing the Plaza Accord. To this day, when the United States once again turns its spearhead toward Japan. But the Yoshida Shigeru administration has completely changed its former attitude of groveling to its owner. It has demonstrated an unprecedented level of independence. So, is Japan's tough stance this time just bluffing, or does it have solid confidence? What kind of impact will the U.S. Japan tariff confrontation have on the relations between the two countries? On local time July 9th, Trump sent a letter to notify the Yoshida administration that the United States would impose a 25% tariff on all goods imported from Japan, effective from August 1 st. This came after Japan became the first country to negotiate with the United States following Trump's announcement of the so-called reciprocal tariffs on April 2 this year. Trump also showed special kindness by raising the tariff on Japanese products from 24% to 25%, an increase of only 1%. The harm is not strong, but the insult is extremely high. In response to such a current situation, during a campaign speech for Liberal Democratic Party candidates in the House of Councilors election, Yoshida Shigeru stated that the tariff negotiations are a battle concerning national interests, and we must not be looked down upon. In fact, both the United States and Japan were very optimistic about their tariff negotiations at the beginning. As soon as the Japanese delegation arrived in the United States, Trump posted on social media that the negotiations would end soon. In his view, Japan would never go against the will of the United States. By condescending to personally meet with the Japanese negotiating representatives, he considered it a great favor. He thought that with a little effort, he could easily control Japan, and no matter what conditions he put forward, they would agree. However, in the eyes of the Japanese, there is a special relationship between the United States and Japan that is different from that with other countries. Japan is not only the United States' most reliable ally in Asia but also its largest source of investment, creating the most job opportunities for them. From any perspective, Japan should be treated differently. Under their respective perceptions, the United States and Japan put forward their own demands to each other, but in the end, the negotiations fell into a deadlock. The divergence between the two sides lies in that Japan has tried to package issues such as steel tariffs and automobile tariffs to negotiate with the United States, demanding that the U.S. cancel reciprocal tariffs. However, the United States insists that Japan open up its automobile market, expand imports of agricultural and sideline products, and refuses to revoke the reciprocal tariffs, stating that automobile and steel tariffs must be negotiated separately. This has left their negotiations without any substantive results to date. For Japan, the U.S. tariff policy has directly hit its economic lifeline. First and foremost, the automobile industry is a pillar industry of Japan and one of the few industries capable of global competition, playing a crucial role in Japan's GDP growth. In 2024, Japan's total exports to the United States exceeded 21 trillion yen, among which automobile exports reached 1.37 million units. Together with various auto parts, the total export value amounted to 7.2 trillion yen, accounting for 34% of Japan's total exports to the U.S. The automobile industry itself is an enormous industrial chain, encompassing a series of related upstream and downstream ecosystems such as steel, electronics, and chemicals. The entire industry provides nearly 6 million jobs for society. Once the automobile industry suffers losses due to U.S. tariffs, these related industries will also fall into trouble, triggering a chain reaction including worker unemployment, plummeting incomes, and economic recession. The tariff rate proposed by the U.S. this time is 25%, and this is just the basic tariff, excluding tariffs on industries such as automobile steel and aluminum. Trump has previously stated that he wants to impose a 50% tariff on Japanese automobiles. Why target Japan specifically? The most direct reason is that Japan has set a series of technical and regulatory restrictions on imported cars to protect its domestic automobile brands, making it difficult for foreign brands to enter the Japanese market, especially American-made cars, which account for less than 2% of the Japanese market share. In contrast, Japanese cars hold a market share of over 35% in the United States. Seeing such a data contrast, Trump is naturally angry, which is why he has repeatedly accused Japan of restricting U.S. automobile imports. In addition, the Japanese government would rather let the Japanese people go hungry than import American rice, a move that has made Trump fly into a rage. As we all know, the United States is an agricultural powerhouse and a major rice-growing country, but rice is not the staple food of Americans, so most of their rice is for export. The U.S. is also one of the world's top 5 rice exporters. Japan, on the other hand, is a country where rice is the staple food but has long been in a state of rice shortage. As an island nation, Japan has limited land resources, and agricultural production is crucial to ensuring domestic food supply. Over-reliance on imported food would pose a threat to national food supply security. Therefore, to protect its domestic agriculture, the Japanese government has imposed high tariffs on rice imports and strict import quotas. As a result, people can only buy expensive rice. And sometimes even can't buy it at all. We won't discuss whether such a phenomenon is reasonable. However, in the eyes of Americans, Japan has long maintained a huge trade surplus with the United States while being in an overall trade deficit. In other words, Japan is not without importing goods, it just isn't importing American goods. That's why Trump said Japan is taking advantage of the United States and demanded that Japan open its market, otherwise, high tariffs will be imposed. However, the markets that the United States is demanding to open up happen to be Japan's economic and security lifelines, which they cannot accept under any circumstances. Therefore, the two sides have never been able to reach a consensus. In response, Ishiba Shigeru explained that the Japanese government, in order to avoid making easy compromises, has put forward the demands it should make, safeguarded what it should safeguard, and continued to engage in difficult negotiations. In fact, the Japanese government is now suffering in silence. Earlier this month, Ishiba Shigeru had insisted that he believed Japan would be treated differently by the United States. But facts have proven that in the face of national interests, any assumption cannot stand the test. The disillusionment with the United States has also plunged the Ishiba administration into a predicament. Currently, Japan is holding the 27th House of Councilors election. The Liberal Democratic Party led by Ishiba Shigeru is a minority party in the House of Representatives. If it loses this House of Councilors election, Japan will inevitably undergo a change of government. According to the latest opinion polls, the ruling coalition formed by the Liberal Democratic Party and Komeito lags behind the opposition camp in support. To achieve long-term governance, Ishiba Shigeru must adopt a relatively tough stance on the U.S. tariff issue. Meanwhile, efforts are being made to resolve the issue before the election voting on July 20th. Since the new U.S. administration took office in January this year, Trump's attitudes on a series of issues such as regional hotspots and economic and trade tariffs have shaken the trust of the United States' traditional allies in it. Japanese people's expectations for the Japan-US alliance have significantly decreased. Polls show that currently, only 22% of respondents trust the United States. Regarding how the Japanese government should respond to U.S. tariff pressure, nearly 70% of respondents believe that Japan should adopt a tough stance and not easily compromise with the United States. Therefore, whether out of objective reality or consideration of the will of the Japanese people, the Ishiba Shigeru administration can only show a tough posture. However, this also means that resolving the tariff issue before July 20th is basically impossible. Trump set the effective date of the tariffs on August 1st, partly to extend the negotiation period. On the other hand, it is also to wait for the results of Japan's House of Councilors election. If Ishiba Shigeru can remain in power, he is likely to choose to reach an agreement with the United States as soon as possible. If there is a change of government, the new administration will instead not compromise with the United States quickly, and the two sides will inevitably continue to engage in a tug-of-war. However, historical experience has long proven that Japan's tough stance is only a stopgap measure. This country originally grew up under the support of the United States and is deeply dependent on the U.S. economically and militarily, with almost no countermeasures capable of shaking the United States. On the contrary, the United States has numerous means to force Japan into submission. Therefore, the tough posture Japan is displaying now is merely to make the outside world see that it is not kneeling in a completely humiliating way. Japan's submission to U.S. will on the tariff issue is an inevitable choice. However, we must also note that as U.S. global influence relatively declines and the trend of multipolarization accelerates, Japan's series of actions indicate that it is seeking to gradually break free from the shackles of hegemony. In February this year, when Trump tried to halt the Russia-Ukraine war and push for peace talks between the two sides, Japan insisted on providing $12 billion in military aid to Ukraine. Clearly, Japan's fear and wariness of Russia made it willing to defy the United States, choosing instead to weaken its powerful northern neighbor through the Russia-Ukraine war. In May, Ishiba Shigeru paid a 4-day visit to two Southeast Asian countries, Vietnam and the Philippines. The three sides discussed maritime security issues and regional dynamics. Japan and Vietnam considered establishing government security capabilities and strengthening the aid cooperation framework, while Japan and the Philippines intended to sign a comprehensive military intelligence protection agreement. The geographical sensitivity of Vietnam and the Philippines goes without saying, yet Japan has chosen to promote strategic cooperation with them in the military field, and its intentions are obvious. In June, after Israel launched airstrikes on Iran, Japan unexpectedly issued a strong condemnation against Israel. The reason is that Israel carried out the airstrikes on the grounds that Iran was about to cross the nuclear threshold, which made Japan feel a sense of crisis. Japan's nuclear capability is far stronger than Iran's. The reason why it has not crossed the final red line so far is not that it cannot, but that it dare not. If Israel's strike action is tacitly accepted as reasonable, then Russia and other major powers could similarly take action against Japan using this excuse. Therefore, Japan had to stand up and clearly express its opposition. In this round of tariff war, the unexpectedly tough stance of the Japanese government and the attitude of the Japanese people both prove that this island nation is planning for new living space in the post-U.S. hegemony era. Japan's defense budget has increased significantly for consecutive years, and it has been continuously promoting its military autonomy process, which further shows that certain ambitious figures want to break free from the constraints of the international order and rules established after World War II. From this, we can also draw a conclusion: in the short term, Japan still needs to submit to U.S. hegemony. However, in the long run, Japan is gradually demonstrating its independence and is very likely to follow the old path it took back then. Only this time, I am afraid no one will step forward to shelter it anymore.